Thanks for tuning in for today's webinar, Ionic in 30. My name is Rachel and I'm on the marketing team here, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. So before getting started on the presentation, I wanted to go over some housekeeping notes with you. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will share a link to the presentation after the event, and you'll be able to revisit this content later on, and we'll include a link to the slides as well, so you have access to all of this stuff after the event. The presentation will be about 30 minutes long, and we'll use the remaining time to answer any of your questions. So to help us get through all of your questions, you can submit them as they come up by using the question and answer chat box on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can after the event. And then additionally, if you have any technical issues or concerns that come up, you can send me a message in your chat box as well, and I'll try and help you. So with all of that said, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Matt Netkow. He is the head of developer relations here at Ionic, and I will hand it over to you for your presentation, Matt. Thank you.
Great, thanks Rachel, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got an action-packed overview of Ionic and our entire app platform. Really excited to go over the latest and greatest about our entire app platform. Everything from open source to our commercial offering. So again, I'm Matt Netkow, part of our DevRel team here, and we've got a lot to cover. So we're going to go right into this full presentation and a live demo and Q&A. So again, as Rachel said, leave your questions in that little chat box on the side, and we'll get to those at the end. So let's get right to it, right? So first, we're going to talk about building cross-platform apps, specifically mobile app development, which is what a lot of folks come to us looking to do. You know, building, really at the end of the day, building for mobile can be really challenging. We see this all the time, and let's, kind of go through why that is to start. Now, to start, we have multiple platforms to design and style for, right? Maybe you want to build for, desktop web, mobile web, but increasingly you want to take those web apps or those skills and bring them over to mobile, especially iOS and Android, but it doesn't just translate one-to-one. There's different, user experience and other types of things to factor in there and learn about. You can't just jump into that really without a little bit of background and understanding of how those work. Additionally, with traditional means of building for those platforms, especially native mobile, you have different code bases to maintain, different IDEs and tools to learn and understand, and really the whole ecosystem of going from zero to App Store that you have to get up to speed on. So, it's not, again, it does take an investment of time. And additionally, you likely will have more developers to hire because you need folks, especially if you're coming from a heavy web-based team, like a lot of the companies we talk to, you have to obtain those technology skills and apply them to those different platforms, right? It doesn't just happen. So all in all, there can be a steep learning curve to get started on mobile especially, but we're going to talk about some solutions for that. And then you think about PWAs, or progressive web apps, which are really good for targeting new users across the web and building and supporting SEO type experiences and all of that. So it's really just a really confusing jumble, and we're going to dig into why a bunch of the solutions that you can use to tackle especially the mobile space. So when we look at that, we've really got three different ways. You can build for native, you can build using compiled and native technologies, and then our last one, and perhaps unsurprisingly our favorite one, using web technologies. So let's take a look first at building with native tech. So again, I kind of just briefly mentioned, there's, of course, you get really great performance out of the box using iOS and Android SDKs and things like that, but there is a learning curve there. You've got multiple languages and platforms to learn, such as Objective-C and Swift on iOS and Java and Kotlin for Android, and that takes time to really become an expert in and deploy really great experiences to be able to build that. It doesn't happen overnight. And additionally, you're going to have, by nature of them being native and built specifically for those platforms, it only makes sense that separate programming languages, separate and multiple code bases to maintain, right? Additionally, whether you're outsourcing it or bringing the talent in-house, you're going to have multiple teams to coordinate, which can, of course, lead to elongated project plans and timelines and, risks depending on how fast you're looking to move. That can be a big challenge, right? So if we look next at compiled and native technologies, other types of, whether you're building with native code or with web code, there's a bunch of options out there. The challenge there is you're getting closer to a solution that can deploy onto multiple cross platforms, right? But they can be difficult to work with because they introduce complex abstractions that are only relevant for their technology. Your teams may be able to skip learning some of the native technologies in that background, but you have to learn these new slices that are independent, built by different companies, and really only apply to those platforms. So you can't really take that knowledge anywhere else, whether you individually as a developer in your career or outside of that particular project or company. So you kind of end up with this uncanny valley, as we say, of native versus non-native. Where does that line blur, and how easy is it to work with those? Realistically, not so much. And at the end of the day, you still have to know native development tools to build and deploy apps. So that, those first two can sometimes work for us, but honestly, let's explore the last one, and that's mainly what we're talking about today, is web technologies, of course. And there's a lot of benefits here. It's definitely not a catch-all, but some of our favorite kind of main topics here we like to talk about is that they can run everywhere. So you're talking about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? The language of the web. Browsers have been around for several decades now. And so, when you think about future-proofing and tech that's been proven and will be around for a long time to come, the web is incredible for that. Additionally, it's easy to work with. I think the web is probably the biggest growth we see in terms of new developers. It's probably the number one skill set that new devs learn and that companies are looking for, because at the end of the day, even if you're not getting into mobile per se yet, every company has a website, and internal web apps especially. So it's a skill set that you're going to have regardless of what type of industry you're in or web app or apps you're building. So, and additionally, because of there's accessible standards and open standards that are built that are driven by a standards board, so it's not controlled by any one company. It is a massive collective across several large enterprises and individual contributors. So, driving things forward, always innovating, always releasing new features and bringing new things to the forefront. So that's really great stuff. And as I kind of mentioned, your team likely already knows it. You probably have a team of web developers in some sense, at the very least, maintaining your website today. So, this is really where we like to drive in, and what we're going to hone in on today specifically is web tech. But there is one little issue where native and the other ones kind of do stand out, and where they kind of take the lead typically. And that's the fact that native is a little bit easier when it comes to repeatable components, building standard UI patterns. They're because they have software development kits or SDKs that are provided by Apple, Google, and others. But until today, there's really hasn't been an SDK for the web. You get low-level, as a developer and web browser vendors, they're creating low-level primitives that developers have to build upon and build, to build their great app experiences, and that takes real work. Native has components and gestures and animations all out of the box, but the web has to reinvent these concepts. So never fear, though, this is where Ionic comes in, and that's what we're all about. So let's explore a little bit about our framework. So we're most known for Ionic Framework, the free and open source UI component toolkit that allows you to build these great SDK-based experiences for the web. You can take these components and build native mobile apps such as iOS and Android, build progressive web apps as well, and even target desktop with building an Electron app. Included in this are pre-built gestures and animations. So we're going to dig into this a little bit. But basically all of those kind of native look and feel, especially on mobile, we've got all that packaged up for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can focus on what your team does best, which is building out their specific business case and their particular apps and functionality that you want to be building. Additionally, we have adaptive styling for iOS and material design, which means your Ionic app automatically detects the platform you're running on and styles itself to look like those platforms. So at the end of the day, your app is a native app, and that's all your users will see and care about. They get a great experience. There also is no limit when it comes to accessing native APIs via plugins. So that's your hardware device features like the camera, Bluetooth, and what have you. And we've got a large, vibrant, millions of developers around the world building Ionic apps today. Let's dig in more into some of these component pieces. So we've got over 100 UI components that are built and maintained by our team. Everything from your basic building blocks like buttons and badges to cards and navigation built in. Over 100 of them, all these different types of controls that you would expect, built with gestures and animations in them. You can kind of see on the right here with this animated GIF. We have our Ionic conference app, which is a sample that kind of shows off these different types of gestures. Again, you have to think about swiping between different screens. All these animations and these tiny little UX things add up that your users will notice. And nowadays it's really important to nail that user experience. And with smaller teams and the always push to have smaller teams across companies, you don't want to be spending your time rebuilding all this stuff. Let Ionic do that for you. And as we mentioned with adaptive styling, we've got what we call platform-aware components. So you'll notice with iOS and Android, just a scrolling screen of cards, they look very similar, but you'll notice little subtle differences in the fonts, the shadows around them, all those details that, I'm not a designer, I'm not a UX expert, but things that your users would notice, whether or not they realize what kind of looks off to them. We've got that all built and up to date with the latest UI designs for iOS and Android especially. As I mentioned with native access, we've got a community-driven plugin ecosystem, as well as some enterprise and commercial options I'll talk about. This is our Ionic-native project that we talked about that pairs with those UI components. That unlocks all the native APIs, such as Face ID and fingerprints, Bluetooth, camera, file system access, that allow you to build fully native apps and build experiences that users will love. Oh, looks like this is frozen on me here. Okay, so that's fine. We'll continue on. So how does Ionic work? Let's dig a little bit into the technology and then we'll get into a nice demo here. So under the hood, beginning with the version 4 of our framework and beyond, we've rebuilt our components that traditionally have been tied to Angular as web components, or known as internally as custom elements. And really the main takeaway there isn't so much the technology being used, but the great benefit of that is we no longer need to rebuild our framework components. They're not tied to any particular framework, such as Angular, React, or Vue. And my favorite part is as a result of this, is they're really performant, very small to download, parse, and execute, and just quickly, really quick to use for your applications. If you're building serious modern web apps, you're going to have a lot of different dependencies and other features you want to build. So it's really important that we as the framework of choice here, keep everything's really small, fast, and performant. So it allows us and you by extension to use modern JavaScript features and essentially run everywhere. So all different types of browsers and mobile and everything like that. Additionally, we give you a lot of customization control with dynamic CSS variables. You can change the entire look and feel of your app dynamically. So whether that's you as a developer specifying that, or your team with different colors as we see on the bottom there, or at runtime. So if you think of like a settings screen, and we know that dark mode is really popular right now, with kind of a tap of a toggle or a button, you can toggle all of your colors within the app and unlock all different types of possibilities, such as theming and just really customization that is all over the place and unlocks so many different options. And as I kind of mentioned, because of being based on web component technology now, we are, when you talk about us as Ionic, as well as anyone using us, we're really positioned for the future and more future-proofing, right? We now work with Angular, React, and Vue, and more to come. So what's great about that is, as we know, with JavaScript being always having a new flavor of the month type of framework come out, things change over time, right? These three are the big titans right now, but who knows what the future looks like. But Ionic will be there and ready to support whatever comes next down the line with minimal rework and certainly little to no work on your end as someone that's consuming the framework. We additionally focus on, with Ionic 4 and beyond, focus on embracing framework-specific tooling to better integrate with those ecosystems. So meaning using their CLI tools, build systems, and what have you. We do have our own Ionic CLI that we'll kind of talk about, but under the hood, they're using those framework-specific tools to ensure, compatibility, stability. You're not using really anything custom from us, which of course leads to just a better developer experience and maintainability, which is increasingly important, especially when it comes to building any type of software, right? So we handle that really well. Just think of it as Ionic handling the UI and UX with our UI components, and the frameworks handling the business logic layer, the other types of tooling, routing, all of those types of concerns. And it's really easy to get started. We're just an npm install away. Install the Ionic package, and you've got our CLI as well as our framework and all of our toolings all in one bundle. We get started by running the Ionic start command. We have a bunch of different templates that you can use to get started that kind of show off some of the best practices for building apps. And additionally, whether you prompt it, you can specify it directly, like we see here with the type flag of Angular, React, or whatever. It'll give you those templates in that particular framework as well. So really excited about offering that. We just had React launch not long ago, React support, and more to come on that kind of front. So when you start an app and once that's downloaded, you can run the serve command to spin up a local web server, which is what I'm going to show today, and allows you to do development and debugging right in the browser. Not necessarily, you can still deploy to your native devices and things, but you can iterate really quickly, whether by yourself or on a team. So that's one of my favorite aspects of working with Ionic. So with that, let's get over to a demo. I'm going to escape out of Google Slides here and come on over to Visual Studio. And what I'm going to show off today is kind of a real app, an HR type of app that we're calling Ionifits, about to be open source, so let's keep an eye out for that. And what I'm going to do is run Ionic serve and kind of talk through this while this is kicking up. So again, this is our local web server command that builds your project for you. I happen to be showing off this is an Angular project, and that builds your project for you and loads it up in a web browser here. So I've got Chrome. I'm going to do some adjustments here. Okay. And great. So what's really nice about this is we've got the full-blown app in my browser tab and my code on the left here in Visual Studio Code. And I'm able to make edits and save changes and see them live, right? So which relates to whether we're building functionality or making CSS tweaks. The whole gamut is available to us. So let's look over at, I've got kind of like a, again, an employee management type of app with expense tracking and things like that. We will focus on the expense tracking today. So you'll kind of see that, and actually here, we'll have some fun with this. We'll go into inspect and kind of show a kind of iOS or, yeah, let's do that. iPhone 10 kind of view, kind of show that. So we see here that, yeah, let's increase that. So we've got an expenses page, right? The whole idea behind this is, you have, as an employee, you go out into the world, maybe to a conference or any type of situation where you need to log your receipts for those expenses, track the details, and ultimately get paid back by your company. So that's kind of the goal of this here. We'll have what this screen is doing, which we'll talk about next, is, we've got just that expense list and be able to implement basic create, read, update, delete type of functionality, or CRUD as it's called, on this particular screen with some modal, and we'll talk through some Ionic UI controls. So first of all, you'll notice on the left here, I'm using several Ionic components with just basic semantic HTML and really no custom CSS or that kind of development to style it. So it looks really great over here with all different types of colors, icons, and responsive design and things like that built into those UI components. And you'll notice here that just a few elements, for example, a header and a footer, allow me to easily build this UI. And so I can change something like the title from expenses to, let's say, I don't know, expense list, save that, and then have the app refresh on the right-hand side. So again, while I'm in development, we can quickly iterate and test different concepts, really thousands of micro tests as you're working as a dev, and get continuous feedback right in the browser. So that's probably my favorite point there. Additionally under here, we've got the content bucket, which is mainly the main aspect of our screen that's outside of a header or footer. So a lot of the guts of our page here will be implemented, right? And what I'm doing is just basically saying, let's define a list in the center here of all my expenses, and display them and make sure that you can tap into them and edit the details. So I'll show what that looks like in a little bit. But again, I wanted to, so like one example of how fast we can move is I've got, we notice that, this expense looks pretty good, but there's nothing, when we think about UX and providing a really great user experience, there's nothing here that shows or tells the user what to do. So let's add, and really how to get started with adding an expense. So let's pull in this code here, uncomment that, and I'm going to save while that refreshes. And all I'm really doing is saying, well, let's add, a little bit of an image here, pointing to just a simple SVG file to display that. And then some text, we want to say like, well, nothing's found. Let's add one below by tapping on that floating action button, which is down over here. So that's this guy over here. And, we can wire that up to some business logic that says when you click on this, let's load a new expense. So really quickly, I'm able to add in a variety of our different controls. I happen to be using a grid just as a neat little way to kind of get some centering here and positioning out of the box, and really just an avatar to display a small little icon for the money sign or dollar sign. Let's look into what that would look like when I pop open a modal. So we can say like, let's add a new expense or update an existing one. Again, we're using all different types of controls here, mostly just in your typical, under the hood, it's HTML inputs and date pickers, things like that. So I can say, this is again, we're kind of mimicking the iOS and iPhone style. So we've got a nice, native looking control here that I can run essentially on the web, again, locally for development. Maybe our expense was here, and, maybe I went to, I don't know, the airport cafe, and we can type in and say, I had a really big lunch that was $65.44. And I have the ability to, what's really great is integrate with camera functionality, file system, and all that. Now, unfortunately, my device had a little snafu at the end, so I can't show that off on the device this time around. Got lots of other demos and webinars we can go back to and look at that. But I'll kind of take a look at the code, and there's some really great aspects of that I want to point out. So what's really nice about that is I'm just calling, when you click on our fab button here, floating action button, I'm tying this back to, let me go back here, to a service class, right? So this is just wrapping a bunch of our Ionic native plugins and controls. And specifically, I want to look at what we see here. We're injecting the camera and storage and the file system, things like that. Specifically, I want to call out my capture expense receipt button, okay? So you'll notice in these first few lines, a couple things. I'm providing some of the options for that, such as the quality of the image. Do we want a JPEG or PNG, or what type of image should we capture from our device camera? And as well as, the ability to say, okay, let's call that camera API the get picture function, which will automatically open the camera for us and give that image data back to us here once the user selected or captured an image. The main thing I love to point out here when we talk about our cross-platform approach that Ionic does really well is you'll notice from these first few lines of code that I'm running this on iOS, again, in a browser in that context, but you'll notice that there's no iOS or Android specific code here, right? All of that is abstracted behind the native plugin itself. So myself as a web developer who doesn't know the native technologies, and I don't, I really, truly don't, it still has the power to build really great looking user experiences that are really interactive and use hardware devices like the camera in this case. So what this is doing from one line of an API is it detects and knows what platform I'm running on, kind of like very similar to how our adaptive styling works for this, and will automatically open up the camera for us. that is using native code, but that's all been abstracted away. And myself as the web developer don't have to think about that. So you see, I'm not writing code that's saying, if iOS do this, run this logic, if Android do that. It's all just a few lines of code to implement that feature, which is just excellent. So I can click add here, add as many of my, and you see how fast and responsive that is. Maybe I went for some coffee, things like that. We can set a category. This is another little pop-up modal here. We can set that as a meal and say add, and we've got that listed under here. So again, with just a handful of our controls and native plugins, we can build really great adaptive experiences that look and feel like real native apps. Because at the end of the day, when we deploy them using our different tools, they are native, right? All built with web technologies, just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So with that in mind, let's switch on back over. Cool. Okay, just a few more things to cover, but, and then we'll switch over to our live Q&A. We can answer any of your questions that you have. The last thing we wanted to talk about is something we're really excited about. We started years ago with the open source Ionic framework, all those great 100+ UI controls and components that I just demoed there. And we've really been evolving as a company for the past few years. And so I'm excited to introduce and talk about the rest of the Ionic app platform. And really what we're providing here is a way to build really great app experiences from end to end, from start to finish, zero to app store, right? Where you can build it, connect it to different data sources and use native plugins and access native functionality, and then deploy it to all the, all the different app stores or on the web, wherever you want. And that includes a couple of different things we're going to cover briefly, such as a visual app builder, Ionic Studio, premier native solutions that are built and supported by the Ionic team, and as well as mobile DevOps services. So that's your build and deploy and CI/CD type of features that allow you to go from zero to app store and ship continuous updates to your users really quickly, as well as our enterprise support and advisory for teams that need a little bit of assistance with all of the above, or just a small slice of that. So maybe you're stuck on using a community plugin, or need architecture reviews, all these different types of options. Let's look into really quickly. So the first one is Ionic Studio. This is a newer tool for us, really exciting, powerful visual development environment. It's our own IDE that's built and made specifically to make Ionic development really fast and easy for devs. You'll see here we've got a really great drag and drop visual design interface, which is great for prototyping and collaborating with your team members. We can quickly add and access all of Ionic's 100+ mobile-ready UI components and quickly iterate and change things, much like I was doing in the browser in my demo just now, but even faster and more visual way. We can move a lot quicker. And if you're a team that's building tens or hundreds of apps this coming year, that's a big deal, right? You writing in the code from scratch can be doable, but this helps in so many ways, and different features helps your team move so much faster. We also have things like interactive properties menu, so you can, if we look over here, we can quickly tweak the color of our login button. We can drop in UI patterns, pre-built patterns that such as login screens and other types of business CRUD related activities, much like the one I built. All of that's available out of the box for you and will help you move just that much faster. So I'm a big fan of this. Look for more on that coming soon. And the next one is Ionic Native. So this is our, traditionally the community has driven a lot of our open source Cordova and Capacitor plugins, and this is our premium native and third-party integrations. So this really what we're doing here is providing, when you look into the native side of the house, again, most teams have, we talked earlier about the challenges working with native, and specifically when you have web-only teams, you want to still be able to use that talent to build great experiences, but don't necessarily want to hire out or deal with that constant pain of working with native, right? Whether it's learning those technologies or supporting them. Because of course, like any software, we see really quick iterations on iOS and Android. So keeping up with new operating system versions, new details and bugs that inevitably come up with any software, Ionic is here for you to provide, supported and tested and maintained solutions so that you can, get that out of the way and focus just on building great apps for your business and your users. So a couple of those high-level solutions are Identity Vault and Auth Connect, which provide biometrics and authentication type of solutions. So think of single sign-on there. So many of our business apps especially need these features today to be able to secure your data and provide some sort of SSO capability. Additionally, a lot of you are going to be looking to store your data offline, because the reality is service and self-service grows and grows. There's always situations where we lose connection, lose power, maybe go under a train tunnel or something. There's all these different situations where offline is necessary, and you need to be able to sync that data when you come back online. So that's offline storage. And we have core device plugins. So that's kind of what I showed off in my demo of camera and file system and those types of common, as we say, device plugins that you need to access for hardware features. And additionally, we have Ionic AppFlow, which is our mobile DevOps CI/CD service. So this is what allows you to, deploy really your apps from once you've built them out. It's kind of that last mile to getting them to the stores and into your users' hands. So we can do some really neat stuff like generating native binaries in the cloud. So that's iOS and Android. We take out all the pain of working with certificates and making sure that your team is using the same apps and are testing them. You get one main dashboard that everyone can look at, everyone can collaborate. You can avoid all these works on my machine types of problems, whether it's because of web dependencies or different machine setup. It's all done in the cloud and accessible by everyone on your team. We have some, so really the goal there is to automate every phase of the app delivery process. And we also have some neat features like Ionic Deploy, which is our real-time hot code deployment or updates to users. So this allows us to do really great things like push out HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, as well as image updates to our app without going through the App Store review process. So you can imagine there's lots of different use cases for that, including like A/B testing, if we want to test and ship different updates, but not really fully commit to them if we want to run experiments, for example, as well as my favorite, which is bug fixes. So we've all probably building mobile apps run into situations where bugs happen, right? That's software for you. And getting stuck in the App Store review process for 1, 3, 5, 7 days, whatever it is at any given time, we're able to bypass those types of situations. Actually, right now in December, we're coming up on an App Store freeze for a week or two. That's a perfect example where if you introduce a bug in your app, you're going to be stuck until basically January 1st, right? When the App Store team comes back and reprove that. With these types of tools, we can kind of get around that and ship those updates even faster. So I love that. And coming very soon, look out for more info on that very soon, perhaps in January, we're going to have some one-click push to App Store deployment. So that's your full end-to-end deploying to the App Store type of functionality. We'll cover that at a later date, though. And last but not least, we've got, again, expert support and guidance and through our services, guidance and support at every step of the way. This is a large gamut, but really for our enterprise teams, support for both our open source offering as well as our premium software, and that can be anything from the native plugins themselves, guidance on troubleshooting on that, to helping you get to market much faster, right? With whether that's architecture reviews, analyzing your code, or again, thinking about avoiding tech debt and all those types of things, right? We've got team training led by world-class instructors here that live and breathe Ionic and mobile development day in and day out, as well as custom services that help with any challenges. So reach out to us, sales@ionicframework.com if you'd like some more info on that. So here, again, we always send out in an email this presentation as well as this deck, but we'll have some docs and resources that for everything we talked about today coming in an email. So all those links will be clickable and you can access them then. Covering the full gamut of all our products and how to get started with Ionic. So with that, thank you very much. Again, I am Matt Netkow, part of our Ionic's DevRel team. We're going to switch over to questions now. So again, there's a little window here in Zoom. Please drop that into the chat and we'll start answering some questions. So let's start doing that. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. First question. First question is from Alex. Thanks for your question, Alex. I really love this one. So where do you see progressive web apps going in the next few years? Is there anything that might lead you to think that we might see an elimination of app stores? That's really interesting. We get we get asked this a lot, especially living and breathing the web every day. So I think what we're seeing even now is that progressive web apps are, initially we thought they were going to just be this huge tidal wave that would perhaps completely destroy native. Maybe not that dramatic, but much more adoption. And it's actually been more of a silent, slow build, where apps and companies are just building them and not really making a big rise out of it. So it's not something you might see in the news. But when you think about apps such as building for retail sites and anyone that does business online selling anything, which is most of us, of course, but especially retail and similar industries. What's great about a PWA being on the web is that they're indexable by Google and other search engines, so you can reduce that app store friction, right? So many companies and apps are still pushing users to the Google Play Store or the App Store. But what's great about having that content right in front of the user's faces is you are able to drive them to do whatever it is you want to do, shop for different things, log into a site and start using your app. And it's just an incredibly much smoother, friction point, or reducing that friction compared to going to an app store. I don't think they'll ever be eliminated entirely. But I do think that more and more companies are going to start building them. We've already seen that. We run yearly developer surveys and company surveys, and we've seen just incredible adoption the last few years. It's kind of like a silent wave. So I'm a big fan. We again, with Ionic, you can build once and deploy everywhere. So you can have a PWA and package that up and deploy it as an iOS and Android app and desktop app. So definitely look out for that. And yeah, it's a great question. Let's see. So someone asked where they can obtain the native plugins for app development. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. We've got open source community ones that are available. You'll see from one of the links I'll send out from our site and documentation. And then we do have commercial enterprise supported ones that are built and maintained by Ionic. Both are great options depending on what your needs are. You can go either way on that, but that's easily accessible in our documentation. We maintain a community submitted list of hundreds of them, and you can get and start dropping those into your project really easily. So Chuck, really great question, asking why, and I will address this outright. Why the picture, like interacting with the camera, didn't work in the browser, and is there a way we can make it? So again, unfortunately, sorry about that. My had a little issue with my iOS device. I was running on the native side of the house. I was using Cordova in this case, which is not an Ionic project. It's a long-term native app runtime that helps you take your web code and deploy it to iOS or Android and some other platforms. And unfortunately, my iPhone was kind of freezing up on me there. So I wanted to show that off. So we kind of had to scramble there. But what's really nice is, I didn't get a chance to talk about this. We earlier this year introduced Capacitor, which is Ionic's Cordova spiritual successor. So it's basically the same type of tool, but it allows for more of a modern development approach. So really what I need to do is update that app to Capacitor, right? Because one of the things we offer is more standardized device APIs that work cross-platform, including the web. So if I had used the Capacitor one, that the camera plugin, file system, etc., actually works on the web as a PWA with Ionic Serve, and deployed as a web app or website, as well as those native platforms. So I'm actually working on a guide that we're going to release really soon that covers that very thing. I just got a little behind on shipping that out, so we'll have an example out there for you soon. Let's see. Oh, a good question about when version 5 will be released. So we don't have a direct ETA on that. I would say very, very soon, though. That is what I will say. And briefly, I mentioned how Ionic 4 which is our current version, is built on web components. So just a brief mention on that. What's really great about, we do have Ionic 5 coming around the corner, but never fear, again, what's great about that we're built on web components is the upgrade experience is incredibly smooth. So we're gonna have, compared to previous versions where we were switching technologies tied to Angular, that upgrade experience and maintenance long-term is much, much easier. There's likely to be little to no code changes on your part when you move to Ionic 5, but stay tuned for that. We're gonna have a lot more info soon. Let's see. So someone's asking about implementing unit testing within Ionic. And given that's pretty deeply technical, I won't go too deep into it, but it is worth mentioning that, again, this is one of those concerns where we would say use whatever your framework gives you for that. In this case, with like Angular, we heavily rely on, I believe, I think it's Jasmine unit tests and other JavaScript type testing. So what's great is we don't have a preference. We definitely ship some opinionated testing frameworks in our starter apps that you can look at, as examples. But there is no Ionic testing, library or whatever. You use what is built into, whatever that framework of choice is, like Angular, React, or Vue, or use your own, because again, it's all JavaScript based. So we see teams using all different types of tools for that. So great question though. Let's see. Someone asked about, the documentation for Ionic v3 has typically been more detailed and thorough than the current Ionic 4 docs. So we plan on developing it or being replaced by specific framework documentation like Angular, React, and Vue? And that's a really good question. So yes, Ionic 3 has been, just by nature of being out for longer, we've had more time for the Ionic team as well as the community to, honestly contribute to that documentation. So we're always looking for help on that, but that is something that we're actively driving towards now that we've released, as of, a few weeks back, React support for Ionic Framework. We are heavily invested in tweaking our documentation, getting that updated for that. Just in the last few days, even, we've released a ton of updates. So look more out for that. We, myself included, are actively contributing to that. And if there's anything, you have any feedback, let us know. You can always open up, everything's on GitHub and open source. So please, if you see anything that's missing, I believe, in all honesty, we have everything covered at a high level. There's always more detail and examples, and we're working on some of that stuff right now. Someone says, I'm new to working with Ionic Framework. Which version of Ionic should I use to start my project? So I would say, our big, kind of favorites right now are Angular and React, given the size of the community and the content that's out there online. But really, honestly, whatever you want to use, including vanilla JavaScript, is a great option too. So that's, again, why we're built on web components, which means, not tied to any particular framework anymore. So you can use what you're comfortable with. I would say for you and or your team, probably to get started and jump into Ionic and build a quick POC, the quickest way would be using whatever framework or tech that you're most familiar with. So any of those heavy hitters like Angular or React, or vanilla JavaScript, if that's something you prefer to do. But honestly, any of them would be really great. Let's see what else. I think we have time for a few more questions. So Chuck again asks about Ionic app flow. So is it possible to deploy those apps and use app flow strictly for deploying to the App Store, not necessarily needing other parts of our platform? And yes, the answer is that today it's a la carte. You can choose what you really need. We have teams. That's really why we've built it out that way. Of course, the best experience is using the platform end to end, but we recognize that teams are going to have different needs, especially depending on where you are in your app development journey, right? So, but yes, AppFlow today, and has been for actually quite a number of years now, you can go sign up and just use whatever features you need of that. So definitely check that out. Again, ionicframework.com/appflow would be the spot to go there. And you can sign into our dashboard and hub and get started with that pretty quickly. Someone asked, is it possible to create an app like Paint using Ionic? So if I had to guess, you're thinking of Paint as in, kind of like a Photoshop app where you're, using and drawing different things. And it is possible. It's not our core focus to build those types of, really really specific things in terms of like drawing and whatever. But again, we're all built on the web, and I have seen tools and demos where you can use HTML5, and I think the canvas element that allows you to draw and do all types of different editing. So you can actually build an app that contains all that web tech and create a really cool solution. So check that out. Oh, another great question that I think I might kind of touched on, but just to reiterate, is there a way for regular users to contribute to the official Ionic documentation? Absolutely, and we are very grateful and always willing to help out with that. The docs are on GitHub under Ionic-docs, and specifically if you go into our documentation pages, there should be a link at the bottom of each page there's a contribute button. So if you click that link, it'll go directly to that page in GitHub, and you can quickly create an issue or contribute back content. So yeah, we're always up for that. Thank you very much. And if anything's missing or you have any feedback, you can drop that in there. Someone asked, Marco, hello. You're asking if you're building an Ionic app using Cordova. Is it worth it to upgrade to capacitor? Great question. And I mentioned launching a guide to upgrade from Cordova to capacitor. So actually, I would say it is worth it to update to capacitor because we put a lot of effort, a lot of detailed effort into making capacitor backward compatible for 99% of plugins from Cordova. Yeah, 99% backward compatible with Cordova. So actually, I did do another webinar that you can find easily on our site about updating to capacitor. Look for our capacitor 1.0 launch webinar, where I actually detail and I take a Cordova app and I quickly migrate it over to capacitor. Very briefly, it basically knows and reads through your config XML file and pulls in the right native dependencies and more or less works out of the box. I did something with the camera and file system, if I recall, and with almost no code changes, I was able to get up and running pretty fast. So I would recommend at least, create a new branch in your project, add capacitor to it, and give it a shot. And you might be surprised because a lot of folks are easily able to adapt that quickly, as well as check out the capacitor docs, because I myself actually wrote multiple pages of a migration guide from Cordova to capacitor, giving all the details, lots and lots of details about how, the philosophy of the project, how to specific steps to use Ionic native plugins and Cordova plugins, and more. So check that out in our documentation. Great question. If we create an app with capacitor and push updates to end users, so they have new content available offline, is there a limit to the size and types of those files? We'd be pushing HTML, XML, JS, and CSS. Could be rather large. That's a good question. We'd have to look into that in terms of the size limits. I don't believe there necessarily is. What's really great about the Ionic deploy process, though, is we have several options for deploying those, meaning that you can configure, meaning you can download those updates in the background while your user's using your app. That would probably be the recommendation for, if you're downloading tens of megabytes of data, you can do that behind the scenes. Or we have another option such as when the user opens their app, they're forced, and you show your splash screen or a status screen saying like downloading updates, right? You can force the user to get the latest updates before using your app. I would look that up. It's called the Ionic Deploy background approach to learn more about that. But yeah, I think that would definitely be feasible. And AppFlow is supported by virtually any web app framework, Vue, Angular, React, as well as Cordova and Capacitor today. So everything works out of the box with that. It's really been evolving really nicely. Are there any big changes in upcoming Ionic versions? So again, I'm only going to tease a little bit about that. Stay tuned early next year for those changes. But we've got updated performance, new animations and gestures that mimic and implement the latest iOS and Android features. All different types of goodies, but you're going to have to wait a little bit on that. But stay tuned. That's some really exciting stuff. So I think we have. Let's see, time for one more. No, I think that about wraps it up. Wow, so many great questions. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, Matt Netkow with Ionic and our DevRel team. Thank you so much, Rachel, for hosting us. And until next time, we'll see you. Thank you so much.